So in late June, okay, it looks like we don't make it out of the netherworld right away. It seems like the Nagas have triggered off another mine, and we end up going deeper in the netherworld. And by June, we're dealing with the mermaids again. So it talks about water spirits. Water spirits are powerful entities. They're responsible for cleaning the air, regulating the rain, managing the ocean creatures, and controlling the current. They are tied into the emotions, and they have the ability to create real people or clone entire races.
The following clip is exclusive content from the University. Access over 300 videos and 26 courses with advanced metaphysics on demand. Jump in live chats with Savan and the rest of the tribe. New materials are available monthly, along with guides and regiments. Subscribe today and save $25 off your first month membership. Links are in the descriptions. Subscribe to Secret Energy TV or this channel for future show notifications.
You know, there's all this other stuff going on around us too, by the way. Like, remember, there's like, this is just like the report of what is going on inside of tribe vibes and the metaphysical builds and the things that are happening. This is also the time that we decided to embark on just the total awareness of how we would decide to govern ourselves in the future, that we would even start digging into becoming our own economy. So again, the beginning of this was as tuning in and choosing your frequency, though, on the metaphysics. And it's like really taking that power of being able to control whether you're happy, you're sad, all those different frequencies and emotions, whether somebody's got you upset or whatever, just really being able to say, okay, I'm going to choose my frequency. And I'm going to read some of this because, you know, this is good stuff, but it says, this principle focuses on the importance of tuning into the frequencies that are most beneficial to our spiritual growth and understanding. So it's just like, at this point, it's all about you. So the frequencies that are going to work out the best for you is the ones that you want to put yourself in first, because you wouldn't be able to really assist anyone if you didn't feel comfortable. And I go on, it emphasizes the need to stay focused and to allow our ancestors to see us, because the reality is that, like, I'm not going to want to be in a frequency or tapped into a frequency that I don't prefer. And when we can think of our ancestors, we get to think of just vibrational frequencies and beings that we want to really be around, that we vibe with. And if they're on a high vibe, you don't really see beings that are not really connected, hanging out with each other, right? Because again, it's about preference. That's what sovereignty is. And this is another thing about sometimes what can be so foreign to our mind and our consciousness is that, you know, if you don't want to do it, as a sovereign, you just don't do it. You don't have to explain why you don't want to do it. If you don't, you see what I mean? So in this world, we're always just explaining why we want to do something or not want to do something, and we try to measure it by whether it's right or wrong to everybody else around us. But that's not the sovereign reality. So it does become important for us to realize that, you know, we're choosing our frequency. And it says emphasize the need to stay focused and to allow our ancestors to see us. I felt like that was key, because it's like, again, when you're going through these different experiences, especially in the future, there's different kind of things in the planet right now, right? As we're opening up the intelligence more, the intelligence is a frequency and it's a certain stage of awareness. And when we reach a certain stage of awareness, it allows certain things to be able to tap into the field on a planetary level, on a galactic level, on a spiritual level. And so, again, it's just that awareness that, well, any real protection is just staying in itself shielded by those advanced beings that are us in the past, present, future. But that still requires that we stay on the wavelength. I also say here, we discussed the mission of preventing the end of the world and how people begin to speak this language that is still happening today. And, you know, this is kind of in itself fractured because the rest of the notes need to be there. But I'll add it there is that, you know, there is a idea almost like, okay, well, I'm going to go and save the world. And yeah, there's just more to that. Like, there's more to that. I'll get to that in a minute. I think I need to bring that back around and kind of re-edit that a little bit more before I can get into it. So the last one was the true meaning of love, because this was right around the time that we started seeing that symbolically, esoterically. I mean, these are great builds. That the word love actually was a torus field, and we pulled it all apart. And this knowledge was really showing us that this field in many ways was like a torus field. And then the next alternative would be the pentagram. or what we call phi. And so it really showed in the symbolism, are you a lover or are you a fighter? And again, these dualities that always come up, a lot of choice was there. Like, I'm going to be a lover. And, I always feel like the world can get as much loving as they can get, right? Like, it's a lot of fighting going on. So we need more love. So it was just that manumission, that statement of self and saying, look, I'm coming in this to love. And so the sentence here is the principle focuses on the true meaning of love and how it is the only energy that can bring two forces together in balance. I remember that was a big one. Like, it's like, if you're going to look for this ultimate power, you can always notice when this energy of love comes in the space, which is the divine feminine energy also in many ways. And there's a divine masculine version, but the divine feminine energy in itself always makes people want to come around and get together and connect versus repel and push them away. So it's just that awareness. And we talked also about finally mastering wisdom. And I said this principle focuses on the importance of mastering wisdom and understanding the times that we're in. It emphasizes the need to understand that what we are getting into when we're speaking English and trying to know everything. I wanted to stop there. Like, when we want to know everything, we need to be able to read that. So we need to get that in some type of language. And we have to realize like that's the part where the initiate, because this is a little bit beyond neophyte, the initiate learns that, wait a minute, I'm really asking to know everything. What kind of mental condition would I actually be in if I knew everything? And then instead of coming down on yourself like, I got to find this, and like the time is running out, it's about to be revelation, and just kind of crashing into certain mystical BS, which, there's a lot of out there, you kind of more of take a step back and say, okay, well, let me prep myself for this ability that I'm about to gain of knowing so much more of the English language. Because remember, as we talked about earlier in the year, the power then comes in through the words in the language. And then, as you're looking at the Masters of Reality, Pierre Sabac's The Murder of Reality, Masters of the Waveform, the books, the Mami Wata Priestesses, the Aliens, and Alien Wombs and Spirits, right? So all of these books, they introduce new words in the lexicon. And so in that, again, your consciousness expands because you become more aware of certain things, but you become aware of them in a linguistic way. And of course, later on in the year, we started talking about how to bring that into feelings. But this was that dial in. And I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to keep going. Let's see what this says, though. So my notes was like a little crude. So when I started putting this together, most of it was cohesive, but I literally had to start proofreading this. And I was like, am I going to take a little time to like relax for a moment before I dive into the show? Or am I going to proofread? So needless to say, you got the rough draft, but you get it. So I talk about also how I say it also discusses the design of the advanced spiritual relics to counteract distortion, the connection of the stars, the game of so what, and the hyperbolic triangle and pole has the appearance of the ancestors. So as I said, that's deep stuff. That's like a rock. That's like a baby trying to eat a rock, because each of those principles we would need to go through and say, okay, which one was that? But yeah, it's there. I mean, I did like the game of so what, though, because so what is like when you go into that deep, like energetic downturn inside of yourself, and you start complaining about every single thing that's going on around you and how you're so downtrodden, then to just tell yourself, so what? And just to see how the self reacts to that, especially as it starts reflecting on people with no fingers, countries that are like tilting over into chaos, you know what I mean? And things that are, could make life, a lot more difficult. And then just kind of checking ourselves and seeing if we just got in the habit of always like being downtrodden, right? So March, well, actually, this is, let me see. So March, yeah, so we're in March. March actually ends up having two parts, but I kind of pushed one part into April. And I'm actually, again, I'm speeding through this a little bit because I want to open this up and I want to get some reflections about the experience. And also, I do want to kind of cover what we're going to be diving into next, especially towards the beginning of next year and even now in some of the launches. But again, I wanted to make sure we go on this Odyssey and Quest together. So if you remember in March, this was when, we had this at this point already started full blown into creating a DAO. And, I was going in. So I was literally educating myself on monetary policy. And so the DAO obviously is decentralized autonomous organization. This is act of bringing in a decentralized governance framework and an ecosystem into Secret Energy and beginning that process based on the mentorship with creating a utility, which I'm happy to say that at the end of the year exactly, we were able to go live with Dream Engine, which is a big part of that utility that we were discussing within why, if we were ever to create a token, we would need to have a utility first, right? Or else it would just go to zero, which we're seeing a lot of stuff just taking pain on the charts these days. We talked about governance, like that ability as sovereigns and moving in that direction, even as a corporation, et cetera, but just really understanding what are your allegiances and starting to say, okay, let's bring in a new governance model or at least begin that vision. So that way, everything that has been designed exists beyond anyone that may expire, including myself. Just putting something together that can really run itself, runs with councils and committees. So all of that was knowledge and wisdom and awareness that we were receiving. And what I learned, I passed on to everybody else. And there's even actually a whole series of videos, even on YouTube, of just my experience and how I would look at if I came into the job, if you may, or I came into the ordainment, we can say it that way, of being the central, what do they call that? The president of the decentralized bank, I guess, which is erroneous because anything decentralized doesn't need a president. But I was just, if you had an opportunity to say, this is how I think things should be run, or this is the transition at least to how things should be run, what would that look like? So that was my greatest effort at teaching that and also beginning the process of implementing that. So we moved into April because, as you can see, March was, really deep into fintech, financial technologies, and really being serious about that. So, right, it didn't take us long. By April, we're back into the ancient wisdom again. So, as this says, ancient wisdom and mythology are the foundation of spiritual understanding. This includes references to cannibals, Highlanders, Yahweh, Allah, Israel, the Savior, Masonry, the murder of Hiram and Amram, the sign that we are gods, and melanin, the sunboat, the master plan of the earthbound, right? So, it was kind of like, I was getting a little too much of March. The financial side, I decided to take a deep dive into, it's just, again, this was more actually in this time, more of like, okay, look at this story. And I was even talking about this the other day. I was like, okay, so the story at this point is that some extraterrestrials came here and got it on with us. You know what I mean? I'll keep it G-rated tonight. And it's just like, how is this, you know what I mean? It's like, has anybody thought about updating the story? But when you're also looking at the story and you realize, it includes these components. And I think at this time we were talking about, King James and all of what was going on in King Charles, Charlemagne, the Highlanders, as it was called, and, even connecting that with the movie, you chop the head off of the snake and, and just all of these different things that were that are happening on earth in that ancient lore and wisdom that is basically the sediment of what is going on right now, and just kind of seeing how that deeply is impacting things. We talked about technology and language. Advanced technology and language are the tools we use to structure and control our subconscious, okay? And this, again, was another big deep dive because it really tied into not only the linguistic structure, it also tied into technology and its mimicry with spirituality. It says includes references to worlds, words, and archetypes, just kind of how all that packs in together, how you have like literally a word that's a symbol and it has a personality, right? And we've talked about this, like numbers that have personality, like what is it like to be a number one? What does that say physically? So you come in with that straight line, the ruler, right? And so they look at the sun, they say, oh, he's got straight line or beams that penetrate, right? So all of those different symbols that are accompanied with these letters and words, how they just kind of tell stories. And now you got the story kind of coming out of the box. So let me see. So I talked also about the spiritual engines. Now this was again, the deeper build, because even that term, right? A spiritual engine, they're the forces that drive our spiritual growth, right? This is like in the chakras themselves is like a spiritual engine. This includes references to the English remnants of the God's language, the first lens controlling the projections of the worlds, and the lover of order. So this was dialing into when we see, like, we're now like how many generations away from the first act, and that every time there's when the first act takes place, in the second act, like a movie, comes in based on what happened in the first act. And in many ways, the acts begin to repeat themselves, but the division or the film between every act doesn't oftentimes allow us to see the connection between the whole story, right? And so, that was very interesting. And again, not only see the connection in ourselves with spiritual engines, but also see the lens in itself and how that really plays around with the world and all of our perceptions in the world. So May comes in, and at this stage, we're also doing some would say shadow work, kind of begins at this point, where we're looking at really the state of consciousness. And if we're negative and we're being in a certain energy that is basically causing what could be said is menticide. So it's overcoming menticide. We are all headed home, and our biome is everything. Listen to what I'm saying. That could it be that we're these beings that are looking for homes, that we roam until we can find a home? And that when you come through a life and you come through experience, especially with the other beings that you're around, you're really just in the experience to actually saying, have I found my home? And, this biome around you even is everything. So it's important for you to make sure that you're putting yourself in the best condition, especially when it comes to being calm at times and being relaxed and being able to remove yourself from stress. We talked about this as a temperament-based design, meaning the human being has temperatures and degrees, right? This is the degrees of knowledge and the degrees of wisdom. Also the temperament of the four elementals, fire, earth, wind, water, and how we've examined different human races for their ability to actually be either more fiery, more watery, or different combinations, but just kind of understanding again, hey, all this is my biome. So I can influence myself by changing physical things in my environment, because that's what our ancestors did. And this is the other thing about Dream Engine is that when we're able to visualize more things from the lexicon, from language, then we're able to visually increase our visual awareness, like what we can really see also in our mind's eye. Which becomes rather interesting, because it's like, well, you haven't seen this yet. How somebody say, hey, you haven't seen this yet, check this out. So actually, did I also copy this? Yeah, I did. Okay, there it is. So spiritual narratives and fairy tales. Okay, so this was funny. Black dog, white dog, it's still a dog. And so this was really just about looking at these different mind control games, especially that go on in religions, that go on in the racial dogmas, the chosen, and just kind of seeing how when you really, really boil down the core principles of what is being discussed, it doesn't actually make any difference to your world or anyone else's for that matter. So somebody has really brought up a problem in reality that even if we solved, it wouldn't necessarily change things for us. And that's why I say it's a black dog or a white dog. It's still a dog. Like, we haven't necessarily changed what is the main component or the driver of what we're dealing with. And I also talked about, like, in the biblical terms, like, God is a jealous God, right? And there's a chosen people, right? And we kind of got into that, where this is how you really start playing people. Actually, that's another thing about, like, I think like an imp. I think that's the term, an imp, which is actually where they get this term pimp from. That a pimp or imp is a god of a lower world. And in this, it's just like that consistent pettiness, and there's the playing against. So, God is a jealous God. God says that, and then there's this favorite thing because he's got the chosen ones. And then when that bleeds into the reality, it comes out very nasty. So this is what we're highlighting again about the narrative and how the narrative has changed humanity. And then so that kind of goes into dark technologies. God confuses the language with war and hardens the heart with magic and circumstances. And this, again, I'm so glad we have these outlines, because maybe some of this information would never be expunged again, because it just was parts of certain builds. But it's just kind of, again, looking at God's behavior. God in the Old Testament, he confuses the languages, right? And kind of gets man confused and things. And some people excuse that away. But then, we look at also that God did harden also Pharaoh's heart. And in that circumstance, Pharaoh supposedly wanted to let the children of Israel go, but God hardened his heart just so he can destroy the children in the morning. And it was just kind of looking at, well, if this is I would love to see, maybe somebody can feedback that data. What percentage of the world, of the 9 billion people, are actually Christians and Muslims too, because this is the same narrative. And just realize that these dark technologies are already upon the face of the earth. And, just by sheer, like, this is the next in line to me. This is my older, so meaning the relationship between man, woman, and God that's supposed to technically be our parent, even though God seems to sit in a position that is somewhat higher than a parent and doesn't also behave as a parent because it's never around. So this becomes very interesting, right? Because a parent to a child is always around, but most people can't find God. And so that makes no sense, as God actually being the parent. Something else must be the parent, not this supposed thing called God. But again, just in that whole, what that would do subconsciously to you is what we were examining. We also started that awareness, and this is kind of May. So this is our benchmark of May, when I start talking about how AI was going to humble mankind, because mankind wasn't aware of its potential anyway as a collective. And that's actually playing out right now. It's going to play out even more next year. It's going to play out in our favor as always, but to see how the world's going to adjust to it is going to be quite interesting. But again, it's, always being that first line of offense and that first line of, like the medic, when, people are kind of reeling from their reality being rug pulled and, their egos being tampered with, we have to, of course, be there with those spiritual sutures and those sacred, what was the word I'm looking for? Salves, to be able to heal those wounds and allow those beings to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and get into what they truly are. But again, because we'll be conservative, 7 billion people's consciousness and imagery has been loaded into something, this thing will continue to humble mankind for a while until mankind switches gears and doesn't decide to compete on that level. You see what I mean? So it's like humans potentially could go back to doing what humans do best rather than the things that machines do really well. So we get into late May. So as you can see, it's it's heating up in the year. This is May Day. This is when all the energy is coming through. The function-dating components are full. We're talking about the power of love, showing love is the best thing for us right now. And so many of these builds were really relative to the vibration also that we were going through. May, if you look back in the year, it was rough. It was heavy duty. There was a lot of things happening. Energy was all over the place. And it was just standing in that love. You know what I mean? If you didn't learn it yet, it was like now time to get in that, or you were going to get wrecked. And a lot of people got wrecked, but not in this space. The power of love stood, and we let that influence our relationships and actually be our guide. I mentioned the power of the stars. It's possible to draw down the power of the stars and control people and events. Hollywood has the master stars, and the stars can be read through real people. And a lot of these deeper introspections are also to let you see how you can run your reality, and how, because it tells you the mechanics of how reality works. So if you could either get run by reality or you could run your own reality, but it would still be the same applications and the same rules that apply. And so we dug deep into just that awareness again, that our ancestors were keen on how to draw down the power from the stars. And just as you can see, the sun is very powerful, and many of the other stars, that there's essence coming off of the star. And when you know how to magnify that essence and align with that essence, then in fact, you could bring that here because we are there. And but that Hollywood had already cooked up a rather crude version by just finding people that are resonating certain archetypes, especially the Joker, and then empowering them with the current of the energy of star power, which is what human beings would give to a person that they start to become the fan of. You start fanning their aura, right? So they start to spin more, but they're spinning with your current. And then how you would basically have a few people that will be holding all of the power, the currency, and even the money of a lot of people, and then kind of controlling those people based on how they act. But these people actually still being themselves correspondences to stars that were born on certain days. And then you'll have a Jesuit that, or even a Cohen that actually knows how to cast, because, you know, that's why you cast an astrology chart, knows how to cast. And so they, you know, they're trying to find the Jedi, basically. It's really like that there are people who will naturally attract certain people in a certain way, right? And we also got into that awareness again of the power of rituals. And again, a lot of this stuff, remember, this is our 14th year, so many of these things we've been over, but this was a specific insight to that. The reason why rituals were taking place, just esoteric deep knowledge being revealed, the reason why rituals are taking place and are taking place right now is because the ritual was a gateway that stayed open through time, because the ritual was never ended. So you would have, like in these ancient sacred spaces, it was a job to do the ritual. And somebody did that every single day. It's kind of like the same thing you see going on with even at the Queen's Palace, like there's a change of guard, and all that stuff goes on every day and has gone on every single day for the last 2,000-3,000 years. Okay. So in these rituals, but we're talking, you know, the full blown ritual, incense, you know, Xerxes, couple goats, whatever, but full blown rituals were constantly being conducted in order to maintain a connection through time, so that someone in the future then doing that ritual would be able to connect into that space. But it's, of course, then going beyond seeing the external version of the rituals, right? So rituals can be used to control our environment, such as the Egyptian death ritual and the vision quest of the Indians. But sacrificing bad habits can help us escape bad karma and extract reoccurring topics, okay? And what this is centering around on is that for us to be able to see that the sacrificial part of a ritual is to rid ourselves of things that we want to release ourselves from. So I'm giving that up. And it's a thing that you can kind of do personally. It's how you kind of escape bad luck, is that you do the maintenance on yourself. And so you hold your own scales. And so you know that if it's time basically for me to commit something to the fire, then I'm going to go and throw it in the fire. I'm not going to wait for this to break something and then me to kind of start tumbling down the ladder of lights, and then that being the lesson, and then me just wondering, like, I don't know what's going on in the reality. Why is this happening to me? Everything bad's happening at once. And then that, of course, leads us to that awareness that, but you got to also get the pipeline clear too. So just because you hear about some advanced knowledge that's going to change things doesn't mean it changes it right away. Generally, change starts coming through in about 22, 23 days, sometimes immediately, depending upon your cycles. But it's just that awareness that, hey, you're doing this. And the faster you can get into, doing the repair on yourself, then you can even extract reoccurring. And I think there's a better word for topics, but it's like these reoccurring patterns. It's kind of like a reoccurring pain, like a hereditary thing that you can actually. It's kind of like even an extraction in dermatology, right? Where an esthetician has to, go in and remove that blackhead. So you can kind of do these extraction processes by taking yourself through the sacrificing of bad habits. And let's also remember that there are good habits. Okay. Let's zoom into June here. So June now, it's getting real occult by June. And this is funny because you can also tell the weather of last year too, like just energy. And so if we were like really looking at weather, not the one that's like in the sky, but the spiritual weather, we can literally go back through these notes and actually feel the force and feel the energy. So by June, we're at the primordial forces again. So we're literally standing on a foundation and we start diving in deep again into the forces of fire, earth, wind, water. And those builds are incredible. We also started getting into like completely finalizing. And I even have parts of the notes that said, this is the last time we're going to discuss this. But something was calling and it said, we need to study the Naga again and make sure that we have that story completely clear because it's very fundamental to us realizing, of course, even where some of the habits and the culture now have come from. And so first thing we were like realizing the Naga was a matriarch. We, of course, have lots of supporting books and literature, but that you got to realize like the difference between a matriarch versus a patriarch and a patriarchy and then actually shift your mindset to realize what would the vibe be living in Naga times as a matriarch. We talk about Tupac Amaru and, just all of the connections between the Messiah. We talk about the Naga being somewhat of a hybrid go-between between the serpent families and now these mammalian families. Of course, I'll read here. It says, the principle explores the matriarchal society of the Naga people and their traditions, such as the surnames, the lunar dynasty, because we went through all the surnames and because we had this, what was that, Dr. Srivaranathan's book, and it was listing all of those surnames of these dynasties and these Kush dynasties. And we were seeing so many last names and things that we see a lot today. And then we were just, again, seeing this lunar dynasty, right? So it's just kind of like shifting to another consciousness, seeing the difference between a solar dynasty, the solar patriarchy versus a lunar matriarch dynasty, okay? And just, again, the I won't say over implementation, but definitely the implementation of Kundalini in the society, right? And we even cover the Maya legacy. This principle looks at the legacy of the Maya people, their worship of the setting sun. Remember the setting sun. This was another thing that was kind of omitted. The Mayans were sun worshipers. No, they worshiped the setting sun. And their predictions of the end of the world. And then the original nations being Mayans, and their founder and their architect being Marduk, which is another name for one of the sons leaving out of Kemet or Egypt. And just to it ends with, and also emphasizing the importance of values and sovereignty and honor, because it's funny because I actually mentioned this here in a moment, but like all of these races of beings, which, if you're sitting back just judging history, you're just kind of judging your ancestors. And it just becomes weird. And if you try to figure out which ones are yours and which ones belong to another group of people, it'll even get weirder. So it's just about acceptance and seeing, okay, this is the fertilizer that we've all come from. But it's just kind of seeing how we're kind of crawling out of, if you may, even the lunar dynasties where the matriarchs are completely hive mind and everything is actually controlled inside of that nucleus. And because it's all about instinct, which is what the moon controls, then everything is very ritualistic. So you don't really see new things as we perceive new things. You see ritual, things being done and principles being upheld and staying the same way for thousands of years, like samurai and, all of these honors and principles and rituals and things. And sometimes you can catch that when you're dealing with older people and you come in their house. They don't want you, there's still plastic on the couch. It's like, don't sit over there, don't talk when grown folks are talking, all of those things. I think maybe we won't be seeing that much of that in the world, but I came from that time. And so this is the way things are done. We don't change them and how they're done. There is no better way. And, there's a lot of gold to that. I definitely say that when we change things, it becomes like an experimental process. And sometimes you wonder if we should have kept it the same way that it was originally, especially if that was in alignment with the universal design. But hey, that's all about experience, and that's what we're going through. So we move on. We're now in the late June, and looks like we're making decent enough on time. Am I sharing that with everybody? Let me try this again. Okay. Try to hit the gas a little bit here. Make sure I shared that last one. Yeah, I shared it with everybody. Okay. So in late June, okay, it looks like we don't make it out of the netherworld right away. It seems like the Nagas have triggered off another mine, and we end up going deeper in the netherworld. And by June, we're dealing with the mermaids again. So it talks about water spirits. Water spirits are powerful entities. They're responsible for cleaning the air, regulating the rain, managing the ocean creatures, and controlling the current. They are tied into the emotions, and they have the ability to create real people or clone entire races. And so that was a big summary, but it was really what we ended up discovering more of, because this wasn't new information. This was that drive around again to like, why do the mermaids keep coming up? All right, let's put the laser beam on this and see it all. And we had to go into Africa a little bit. As I said, the Mami Wata knowledge from Vivian Hunter, or Mama Zogby, came through. And, we digested a lot of that knowledge and connected it in with everything that we know, even the Anunnaki stuff. And we finally found out, in conclusion, well, again, I keep saying I love to say we finally found out, because it's like, it's always a major revelation. Even if you know about this stuff, do you really know? And so sometimes when you're getting deeper information about it and it clicks even more, meaning like it confirms it, like, this is not playing around. We're not just trying to talk about mermaids here. There's other things we could be doing. We could talk about some Bitcoin or something, but we're talking about mermaids. But why? And it was, again, that advanced race of beings, the other domain, why the ocean is the most unexplored place. Imagine some places being completely, dry and hollowed out cities. What was called the Emerald City itself. We have works that confirm this, or the receipts, such as Bishop Kenko and the Witch Doctor. But that kind of led me down just a whole pathway of a bunch of people also who had testimonies about the kingdom of Satan or Saturn in the ocean, and the angels and the crystal cities and the emerald cities, the mermaids, etc. Okay, so that was an amazing journey. And then, of course, in seeing how water is playing such a big role, not only in wisdom, current and currency, money, just water, right? We're 70% water. What does that mean on an occult level? And just kind of seeing how, if you also can tap into water, because water can't hold water, that it will tell you all the secrets. Women as rulers and teachers. Women have been rulers and teachers in ancient civilizations such as Egypt, and have been persecuted for their power and their knowledge. And this is like just that, again, that addendum to humanity is, remember, women had positions of power. Now we're kind of living in a society it's definitely got a little off balance, but it's almost like even that awareness that women had positions of power, it's more of like kind of seeing the world now as women being secondary to men. But that's not how matriarchs work. And just kind of, again, that awareness of, still making sure those spirits are still respected and kept alive about a world of only women. And we've actually discussed California a bit, in how it was only Queen Khalifa, and her women Amazons, and how men weren't allowed on that island. And that was also remnants of how the ancient matriarchs used to work. We even talked about how that is the reason why you now need to be represented in court, because Queen Khalifa went into the court of England and Britain, probably showing up to Charlemagne and King James and shook her rump, as it's noted inside of the annuals, shook her rump in their face and told them that they would never rule over her, and that California was also full of gold and precious minerals and diamonds on the beach. And this became a mythical place for explorers, but no one would touch it. Nobody would try to, it was impregnable, as they say. So yeah, very, very deep stories about of what was going on in the Americas before the most recent upheavals. Spiritual technology. So that comes on the radar again. Technology has become more powerful than spirituality, and there is a need to balance the two. Okay, because it's just that awareness that, well, wait a minute, one is like the daddy or the parent, which is spirituality. And then now it's just like, oh, technology. And technology is very powerful, but it needs that key. Like, I'm not an anti-technology person, clearly, but I'm definitely not a only technology person. And I believe that technology gives a way to peer into to spirituality, as it always has. Gastric discharge devices let you see auras. Microscopes let you see subplanes and entities on subplanes and energetics that move through those spaces. But they're like accoutrements or crutches to give you the ability to be able to gander further. Plants do that same thing too. So in this case, plants are a version of technology. And then we started learning that basically technology is anything external that is used to repeat or enhance something. So even the definition of technology doesn't become something that's new, but something that we implement in order to give us the ability to peer into things or see things that we otherwise may not have the developed faculties to. But then there's that note that, this is something that we need to keep in balance, because if spiritual knowledge is lost, then we'll be stranded in technology, because it's not the origin point anyway. So it's like the instrument. It's not the boat. Warlocks and water spirits have the ability to extract the creator's mind and manipulate its power. Okay. So yeah, I love the way that summarized. And it's just that awareness that, so when you're practicing certain arts, you realize that you realize very fast that there's an essence or an energy inside of everything. And that is what alchemy is. And extraction is actually the removal of that essence or energy. And then medicine is actually the application of that extraction of the energetics and the re-administration into another organism in order for it to gain or replenish itself. So it's basically like a transference of energy from one thing to another. Some may still remember, I believe that was Mesmer, had what they call the vegetable battery. and this battery they say that all Mesmer's magic, if you may, was done from a vegetable battery. And so what this is about is that were organic batteries that were made from organic things that could actually charge up the environment and charge up even the body a little bit in order for it to perform greater levels of magnetism, right? Because the cat has already been out of the bag a long time ago that the word magnet and the word magic are oddly similar, and it's because of many of the magical works that you would see in the reality for sure being a byproduct of magnetism, all the way from Shakti to reorganizing a person's energetic field, to visualizing other things in the magnetic strain, meaning that the whole film around us is magnetic. So when you throw magnetic flux over it, you can kind of see also what's in the field. Being able to also move things in an acute way, especially with geometry through magnetics, lodestones, and being able to have painless births. So all of the different things about magnetics being. And later on in the year, we kind of zoom back in on bioenergetics, and that really gives us a good magnetic deep dives. But magnetics comes forward as being the true essence of magic. And we move forward. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, we weren't even done, man. We was going deep. So then we get into consulting the dead. Okay, so we try to look at this from the most practical level of a person losing someone and then wanting to talk to them again. And just, if anyone's ever lost someone, how that would come across to you if in the land there were techniques or people that said that they could talk to that person again, and how that person would basically become like the celestial cell phone, if you may, or medium or operator between the physical world and the world of the astral plane. We'll call it that. I don't like to call it the world of the dead because it just kind of gets misinterpreted of what it really is. So these Eve angels or mediums, if you may, that's a better term. These mediums being able to consult or communicate with disincarnate or entities that don't have bodies. So I say exploring the idea of consulting the dead to bring people back to life, as well as understanding the similarities between Bacchus and the Sibyl. And so this was also just that awareness that the oracle, that would be the job of the oracle, right? The oracle is literally standing in between two worlds, and it's the oracle's job to transfer the information or messages and things from that world to this world. And then we were looking at literally how Bacchus is a Sibyl. But so the male-looking Bacchus is actually a female. And when you have the original Bacchus, then you will see that. And then also how the Jesuits that are here now are actually inside of the place that the Sibyls or the oracles were originally running the whole planet from, which is, of course, what you're calling the Vatican. And the catacombs in themselves, when you understand necromancy again, that the heads in necromancy are like crystals in themselves. The ancestral heads are like crystals, right? So that was the whole crystal skull. And what this is about is this is about when you reach enlightenment, they say, because I haven't took a part ahead, so I wouldn't know, that when a person reaches enlightenment, if you open up their head, that you'll see that their pineal gland has turned into a crystal, like a diamond. And it has become a refractor of all the light. And that when that physical part of that being is now leaving the realm, or let me try to explain this right, because you're talking about beings that don't die, so it's kind of hard for me to limit them to time. But the physical thing that you think is dead is a head. But inside of the head is sitting a crystal. And so this catacomb that the Vatican is now on top of supposedly was this huge, what you would say is a library of crystal skulls of ancestral beings. And so this, whatever this area is, and you can still see there's different types, there's the deep level of geometry going on in this whole city. So whatever this is, well, not whatever this is, we know what it is. That is basically seems to be a gateway or portal between this world and quote unquote astral plane. And that there are technologies, if you may, that have been developed in order to be able to sniff or to read the data coming from what you would perceive to be the future or the astral plane. And this is what creates the prophecy or the prophesying component to the oracle's knowledge. So the oracle is designed to receive this message, and then once receiving it, issues a bull through the land, because these are cow goddesses, issues a bull through the land, an edict or decree of the information coming from on high, and then everybody is to fall in line. Okay, so that's what the matriarch, or actually in this case, get in the circle instead of falling in line. That's the patriarch. Everybody's to get in the circle on that bull, edict, or decree. So by July, I think we needed to kind of like, we had went so much. I felt like, man, everybody needed a little bit of, just a little bit of normal life. Because it seems like by July, we've now gone to health and money. And we're examining why many people aren't wealthy pioneers. And this topic looks at the reasons why many people are not wealthy, such as spending time medicating from trauma and how topological heights can control wealth. Okay. And this was just zooming into just, again, is like, again, it's not talking down on anyone, but there are habits to being wealthy and there are habits to being poor. And, we started examining, some of the non-wealthy things that one could be doing in their life, and how there's always this thing that we're healing from this and we're healing from this, and our body heals all the time. We're doing damage all the time. But just that overall, like, are you healed and constantly regenerating, or are you damaged and needing to heal to bring yourself back up to to ground zero? And being able to, and literally ground zero, because what you start noticing is that, and you don't quote me on this, meaning that you don't take this kind of stuff too far, but sea level is technically like the first time you break ground. And then everything above sea level is you getting higher. And I'll explain this in detail because I don't want this to be misconstrued, because it can be. But basically, the higher that you get above sea level, really the higher you're moving out of the debt zone, right? And, sometimes this could be kind of seen as the penthouse, right? Because generally the penthouse is like way on top of the building. But there is a clipult to this, meaning that there's a drawback to getting to the top level too fast, or through the wrong way, if you may, or something that's not designed to how you should have got there. We'll put it that way. And this is no ground. And this is something that the Dogen masters talk about, or talk to a direct friend of mine. So I'm just only quoting things that I know. I only talk about things that I know or experienced, or know it came from somebody that I can truly trust. But that they're big on ground. And if you don't have ground, you can't be initiated, because the power moving through you needs to be grounded. And they said that part of the test was, and they just made a statement, that you need to be able to feel your ground in a plane, like an actual physical plane, that when they're flying, they never lose touch with their grounding. And that's a hell of a ground. So again, the drawbacks of going up too high, though, and like prematurely, it's not your time to be up on that altitude, is you get detached. And some people may feel like that sometime when they're in like a high rise or whatever. They get more and more detached and less grounded. So there's a natural way, a natural process. You want to keep grounding as you're going higher. But it is, again, to realize that the topological heights also can control wealth. This was another thing about how also moving or coming closer to the equator to heal works better than being out on the extreme pole. So if you were going through something, that I always hear it, people come to Costa Rica to cure themselves of cancer. They do that with the soursop plant, right? The Graviola puriens, I believe that is. But because, they grow natively here. But there's more things to it. Also, we found out today that, magnesium, of course, is a metal. Well, I confirmed, ours seem to know already, but that most of the magnesium comes from the ocean, right? And that the 800,000 tons of magnesium that is imported mostly is from the ocean. But this, of course, is why the ocean is such a big healer. And anybody who has the opportunity to go to the ocean on a daily or, whatever, just getting in the ocean will oftentimes feel like, man, that's kind of like the best healing or the best thing for my body. I wish I could get here more. And it's because it's just full of also magnesium and many other things, right? There's the wave, there's the ions, et cetera. So it's that awareness by July that we're tapping into the health and the healing. This is saying dealing with too much money, attention, and the current, right? So we really are consistently remaining in alignment with what we're saying is true. And we know that, like, if you still have too much current, though, then that would be too much attention coming on to you. And you need to be responsible for that. You don't need to just be like, yo, I need a lot of money. And then you're not even aware that your vehicle is not configured properly for you to receive that. And then you just get detached. Because what's the benefit? And sometimes I see a lot of times if there is any divine intervention, it could be sometimes to keep a lot of current from flowing into a being until they're ready to receive that current. If they're looking out for you, if you're guided, as they say. Because other than that, it'd be like throwing you in a Ferrari and you're only like 6 years old and you just came out of a Power Wheel. And now you're getting the keys to a Ferrari and you're just let loose downtown and you're just going to crash into something. And it's really like that. Like when the aura is picking up and the wheels start turning, now you can impact certain things about the waveform around you. So it's good that, if the process is going well, as they sometimes call the hidden, what do they call it? The occultation, or the hidden college. If it's going well, then you're getting the progressive raise in degrees, which is the actual energy going up your spine, until you're ready to now continue to accelerate through those centers and I won't say conquer. It's more like dance with those different aspects of self that may have not been visited in a while and may need maintenance, right? So I go further in. I say this current topic looks at how to manage the deluge of money and attention and courage, as well as how to navigate debt and the netherworld. And so, that's both sides of the spectrum, right? And those builds are very enjoyable. I know not too many people would think they need to figure out how they're going to deal with a lot of money, right? It just doesn't seem to be the right kind of preparation, right? It's like, look, I'll just deal with that when I get into it. But this is serious builds around how to really get wealth for what wealth really is, and then not allow it to take you out, because as we've uncovered also, that those dollar bills with them dead presidents is a form of necromancy. So you need to understand how to deal with all of that. Mastering the water and learning what to ask elements for. Yeah, that was deep. Wow, visiting some of this, like, wow, yeah, we really did go through that. And that's really about understanding that if you are trying to accomplish certain things from an energetic and an elemental level, there are certain elements that you do not use. So you don't use fire to put something out, right? So it's like there's a personality. I had a better analogy. Should have a better analogy than that. There's a personality to every element, and you don't go asking water to do something that is fire's job, or else you're just not going to get a response. And this is just kind of understanding how the energy is working with you. It's not calling on any external forces. You can go on and do a banishing ritual and doing your LBP from Lovecraft and all that. It's not going to work. This is about identifying the elementals within you, and then realizing why maybe the communication between you and your elementals and the fifth. So you have fire, earth, wind, water, and then you're the aether. So why your elementals may not be like kicking in for you, and it's because you're trying to direct them to do things that they're not responsible for doing anyway. And our energy is kind of like that. It gets, in the beginning, especially with a lot of the programming, it's almost opposite. So you have trying to get fire to do things that water do. And I also talk about how that plays out in relationships too, where you need something and the person needs the same thing. And then you guys can't seem to get on that, well, I can produce this a lot and you need it, and you can produce that a lot and I need it. Let's give it to each other. It's more like we need the same thing. And so this is how, you can work with that energy and get that energy balanced. So here we're talking about mastering the water and learning what to say to elements. And this topic explores how to tune into the same station and what you are trying to communicate to, and how to ask water anything but it can't hold. And that, again, is one of those power bills. You have to check it out. Lots of secrets revealed. And it also came from that awareness that they talk about how you put water on the side of your bed when you go to sleep at night in a glass. And then if you have a dream that you really, really want to bring further into the reality, you drink the water. If you don't have a dream that you want to keep in the reality, maybe you don't drink the water. Maybe you just dump it out, or maybe you actually, pour the water out, like pulling out the dream. But that will kind of stepping a little bit too further into my brother's Finn stuff with Dream Tech. So I'll let him take it from there as far as, understanding what to do when you're, you have a projection that you really don't want to at all bleed into your reality. But remember, in most ways, you already have this protection. And a lot of these experiences, it's always good to train yourself to have the best experiences while asleep and to prepare yourself for sleep. But I always remain in ultimate power over the sleep by knowing that some of the things that I see there could be through and indeed a dirty lens. And sometimes this lens becomes dirty just because the aperture of the sky, not necessarily something that's going on with you, meaning you'll notice that in certain times certain dreams will come through in certain times of the year anyway. That's just all a part of us being an organism. So by late July, we're talking about community building and addressing alternative ideas and uniting under common cause and creating real communities. So by July, we're now painting out like, okay, well, let's create, if you may, a wish list, actual idea of what it would be to have a community, like physical communities, or what community in 2022, what this would even look like. What kind of education would need to go on in those spaces? We talk about multidisciplinary education. We talk about software service development. We talk about cryptocurrency development. So we're talking about basically creating modules, something that is sustainable because there's a generation actually happening there. So the beings that are in the community are actually generating so they don't feel stagnated by whoever it is the quote unquote community leader is. We talk about wealth building, legacy value, phase, store, affiliations, products, research and development, and humanitarian initiatives. So basically in July, we were also laying out many of these things that are already in secret energy, but also like moving from legacy, meaning the old system, into the new level of things, right? And so by that time, August comes around because there was a lot of, that was the time I think we were doing the sprints. We had already finished the white paper. We're now actually starting to boot up the DAO here in July, right? So lots of hands-on funding going on. And then in August, we're back again. Spiritual sovereignty, because this is now the time that the legal sovereignty side starts moving in, if you remember. And because now it's like, okay, so we got our cup full of the esoteria, and it's all making sense. It's all clicking. Don't mess with it. But we're seeing now this mirror of it from the legal side of things, and how the whole reality is constructed with the actual physical vehicle and the different instruments that are being used to indemnify this vehicle. So I mentioned spiritual sovereignty, the idea of reclaiming personal power and freedom from external systems and structures that have been put in place. The indentured grantor trust, the concept of attaching labor performance and exclusivity to an instrument that is able to adjust as that value increases or decreases. And this was a great high point because it was the exact piece of the law that shows human beings are utilized in themselves as similar to a contract, or as a contract that has an increased or decreasing value, and that this negotiation is always open to how that value is moving. And when we're utilizing these different instruments, we're agreeing for this continuous transaction to take place. And let me see, reoccurring words and concepts, the understanding of words such as status, standing, capacity, states, right? They say the United States, right? So it's a state. There's a state of consciousness. There's estates, peers, descendant states, and as well as the idea of converting a name to a franchise, meaning like now a name, just as you're seeing with Kanye, just as you're seeing with Prince, the name becomes the franchise and business is being done in the name. Then somebody else owns the name. So in the event that there's a conflict, then sometimes they can take the name, right? And, this being the jurisdiction, and this jurisdiction really robbing a person or denying a person of certain levels of sovereignty, right? And so we come into that level of awareness, and right around this time, it's September. Let me paste this in. Let me go on my third one. This is the summary. They always say, "Hey, Seven, you don't give me any summaries of it." Well, here it is. So September is ascending. Okay, so we're at ascending and descending forces. The principle explores the idea of forces that both push us and pull us. And now we start to remember, because earlier in the year, it's like, oh yeah. Now it's like, wow, that doesn't seem like too long ago. But we were talking about the pushing and the pulling of the field, right? And now the master of the waveform comes in because you realize that It's about figuring out what direction what your energy is moving. And then when you determine the direction your energy needs to move, you do that as a singularity. That means that all of the forces within you, masculine and feminine, work together to accomplish that rather than working against each other. And then so we start delving into even the mind and its narration and its negativity, which actually there was one of the older videos playing today about this. We talk about this principle explores the idea of forces that both push us up and pull us down. It examines the complexity of the lower world and development of the group minds, as well as the idea of racial mixing and how it can cause confusion. So this was another thing we talked about, how that generally, in the olden times, your parents would look at the girl or man that you were going to marry, and they would look at their parents. And, in the tribe, everybody kind of knew, that's the crazy one. And you would see that gene pass down. So it became a thing where you would kind of like keep the blood pure or try to, what they call it, breed up. And I think that they talked about this before, about women were naturally designed to breed up, but that they would look for the stronger men. They would basically look to put their, have a seed put in them that could, came from someone that had gained a greater level of self-preservation. And that's just an instinctual thing, right? And so deep stuff here, because, we're then going into how, like, so what would happen if, you did get like super, like basically you got super interbred, like your genes were like all over the place. How that could also be a part of why you could be confused in your mind, right? So this is like a deeper level of healing, because some people have opposing bloodlines inside of their bloodline. You get it? And this is always being created, like, because right now they're creating that with Russians and Ukrainians, and a lot of these people share the same last name. But as things continue, let's imagine 50 years in the future, 100 years in the future, somebody's going to be Russian Ukrainian. They're already Russian Ukrainians, but there's going to be Russian Ukrainian. So they're going to have the blood of the invader and the blood of their countrymen in the same body. Okay. And then all of those ideas and thoughts and memories also moving in that same nucleus. And so this is a nice introspection, because it can sometimes create cures for us if we experience that disorientation and, feeling like that, you're dealing with the enemy, because, you can have even a part of yourself that doesn't like you. So just it's a deep dive into where all of these different things come from within the blood and within the DNA.